I need to stop right here. Because what I'm about to tell you still keeps me up at night, and I've spent 40 years dealing with the worst financial crimes the federal government has ever prosecuted. My name is James Whitmore. I'm 63 years old, and 3 days ago, I drove 200 miles to a small town in Wisconsin to knock on the door of a man I'd never met. A man who had been sleeping with my wife for 8 months. A man who had stolen nearly everything I'd worked my entire life to build. When he opened that door and saw my face, he didn't flinch. He smiled. And what he said next made my blood turn to ice in my veins. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For 38 years, I worked as a forensic accountant for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division out of the Chicago field office. My job was simple in theory, complicated in practice. I followed the money. When someone embezzled millions from a corporation, I found where it went. When a Ponzi scheme collapsed, I untangled the web. When a money launderer thought they'd covered their tracks, I proved them wrong. I've testified in over 200 federal cases. I've helped put away hedge fund managers, corrupt politicians, and organized crime figures. Numbers don't lie. That was my motto for 4 decades. People lie. Documents lie. But if you follow the money long enough, it always tells the truth. I retired 3 years ago. My wife Diane and I had been married for 33 years. We met at a fundraiser for the Chicago Symphony when I was 28 and she was 25. She was a high school English teacher on the South Side, passionate about literature, about her students, about making the world a little better one classroom at a time. She was the most genuine person I'd ever met, or so I believed. We raised 2 kids. Our son, Andrew, is 31 now, a software engineer in Seattle. Our daughter, Claire, 28, works as a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. Good kids. Smart, principled, hardworking. Diane and I were proud of them. We'd done the hard part. Retirement was supposed to be our reward. We'd paid off our house in Lincoln Park 12 years ago. Between my federal pension, our 401k, and our savings, we had just over $600,000 put away. Not rich, but comfortable, enough to travel, enjoy life, maybe leave something for the kids. That was the plan. It started on a Wednesday afternoon in April. I remember because it was raining, one of those cold Chicago spring rains that makes you wonder if winter ever really ended. Diane had been taking an online painting class for about 4 months. She'd always been artistic, sketching in notebooks, doodling on napkins. So when she told me she'd signed up for a virtual course through some arts academy, I thought it was great. Good for her. She deserved a hobby. That Wednesday, I came home early from my weekly poker game because Phil Kowalski had a dental emergency. The house was quiet. Diane's car was in the garage, but she wasn't in her studio upstairs. I called her name. Nothing. I figured she'd gone for a walk despite the rain. Then I noticed her laptop was open on the kitchen counter, and the screen hadn't gone to sleep yet. I wasn't snooping. I want to make that clear. I was going to close it so the battery wouldn't drain. But what was on the screen stopped me cold. It was an email from someone named Victor Ashford, and the subject line read, "Last night was everything. When can I see you again?" I stood there in my own kitchen, rain hammering the windows, and I read that email. It wasn't explicit, but it was intimate. He talked about her laugh, her eyes, how she made him feel alive again. He mentioned a restaurant I'd never heard of, a hotel in the Gold Coast neighborhood, and plans for next Tuesday when James has his cardiology checkup. He knew my name. He knew my schedule. My hands were steady. That might sound strange, but after decades of examining evidence of fraud, of betrayal on a massive scale, my first instinct wasn't to scream or cry. It was to investigate. I took a photo of the email with my phone, closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it, and went to my home office in the basement. I sat at my desk, surrounded by framed commendations from the bureau, photos of me shaking hands with 3 different FBI directors, and I did what I've always done. I started a file, date, time, what I observed, initial assessment. Then I opened my own laptop and began to dig. Victor Ashford. The name pulled up a slick website for something called Ashford Creative Ventures. It described itself as an exclusive art investment firm, specializing in emerging artists. The site was beautiful, professional, full of testimonials from supposedly satisfied investors. To most people, it would look legitimate. To me, it looked exactly like what it was. A front. I've seen hundreds of these. The stock photography passed off as office photos, the testimonials with no verifiable names, the vague language about guaranteed returns that would make any SEC attorney's ears perk up. Victor Ashford was running a romance scam wrapped in an investment scheme, and my wife had walked right into it. But I needed proof. Real proof. Not assumptions. The next morning, Diane was cheerful. She made pancakes, talked about her painting class, mentioned she was meeting a friend for lunch. I smiled, ate my pancakes, kissed her on the cheek, and told her to have a good time. Then I went to work. First, I called my old colleague at the bureau, Sandra Reeves. She'd taken over the financial crimes desk when I retired. "Sandy," I said, "I need a favor. Personal." She didn't ask questions. Sandra knew me well enough to know I wouldn't call unless it mattered. Within 2 hours, she had a preliminary background on Victor Ashford. Real name, Victor Novak. Age 41. Born in Milwaukee. 2 prior arrests. 1 in Ohio for wire fraud. Charges dropped. 1 in Minnesota for securities fraud. Plea deal, 18 months probation. He'd changed his name legally 4 years ago. His so-called art investment firm had been registered in 3 different states under slightly different names. Each time, it operated for about a year before dissolving. Each time, the primary investors were women between 45 and 65. Each time, he disappeared with the money. My wife wasn't his first victim. She was his latest. I spent the next 2 weeks in surveillance mode, not physically following Diane. I didn't need to. I'm a forensic accountant. My battlefield is numbers, documents, digital trails. I started with our bank accounts. What I found made me physically sick. Over the past 6 months, Diane had transferred $275,000 out of our joint savings. She'd done it in increments. 15,000 here, 20,000 there. Always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic bank reporting. She knew about structuring. She'd learned it from living with me for 3 decades, hearing me talk about cases at the dinner table. She'd used my own expertise against me. The money had gone to 3 different accounts, all connected to Ashford Creative Ventures. I traced the flow in under an hour. It was amateur-level laundering, frankly. Victor might fool lonely women, but he couldn't fool someone who'd spent 40 years tracking money for the FBI. But that wasn't the worst part. I checked our home equity line. Diane had taken out a loan against our house, $150,000. The application had my signature on it. Forged. I pulled it up on screen and actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. I'd testified as an expert witness on forged documents dozens of times. This forgery was decent, but I could spot the inconsistencies in the pressure points and letter spacing immediately. Combined losses, $425,000. Out of our $600,000 in total assets, she'd hemorrhaged over 70%. If I hadn't caught it when I did, she would have taken everything. That Tuesday, while Diane thought I was at my cardiologist, I sat in a rental car across the street from a restaurant called Bellini's in the Gold Coast. At 12:15, Diane walked in wearing a dress I'd never seen before. 10 minutes later, a silver BMW pulled up and a man got out. Tall, fit, salt and pepper hair that was clearly styled to look effortlessly handsome. He was wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying a single red rose. I photographed everything. They sat by the window. I watched them for 2 hours through a telephoto lens I'd borrowed from Phil, who was an amateur bird photographer. They held hands. She leaned into him. He whispered in her ear and she laughed. That laugh. The same laugh she used to save for me. I drove home, walked into our empty house, sat down in the kitchen where we'd shared 33 years of meals and conversations and holiday mornings, and I let myself feel it, just for 10 minutes. The grief, the rage, the bewilderment. Then I closed it off. compartmentalized, filed it away. Because emotion makes you sloppy, and I couldn't afford sloppy. Not now. The next day, I called Andrew. My son answered on the second ring. Dad, hey, what's up? I need to see you. Can you fly home this weekend? Don't tell your mother. There was a pause. Is this about Mom? Andrew is perceptive. Always has been. Partly. I'll explain when you're here. That night, I called Claire. She picked up immediately, the way prosecutors do, always expecting the next crisis. Dad? What's wrong? I could hear it in her voice. She already knew something was off. I explained enough to get her on a plane. Claire, being Claire, had 3 follow-up questions and a preliminary legal strategy before we hung up. That Saturday, my 2 children sat in my basement office and I laid everything out. The emails, the bank records, the forged signature, the background on Victor Novak, the photographs from Bellini's. Andrew sat there in stunned silence, his face cycling through disbelief, then anger, then something like grief. Claire's face went hard. The prosecutor in her took over almost immediately. Dad, she said, leafing through the bank documents, the forgery alone is a Class 3 felony in Illinois. The structuring of withdrawals shows intent to conceal. And if we can prove she was acting in concert with this Novak character, that's conspiracy to commit fraud. I know what it is, sweetheart. I spent 40 years building these cases. Now I'm the victim of one. Andrew finally spoke. Have you talked to her? Have you said anything? No. And I won't. Not until I'm ready. Claire nodded. Smart. We need to lock everything down first. Freeze accounts. Document the chain of custody on every piece of evidence, and consult a divorce attorney who specializes in financial fraud. I've already started, I said. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my case the same way I'd built hundreds of federal cases. Methodically, thoroughly, without emotion. I obtained copies of every transaction, every communication between Diane and Victor that I could legally access. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recording. So when I placed a small recorder in the kitchen and Diane made calls to Victor while I was supposedly out walking the dog, every word was captured. The recordings were devastating. In one call, she told him she'd figured out how to access my pension. She said her friend at the bank could expedite the paperwork if she brought in a death certificate. A death certificate. She wasn't planning to kill me. Nothing like that. She was going to claim I was mentally incapacitated and get power of attorney. Victor coached her through it. He knew exactly what forms to file, what language to use, what doctors to approach. This wasn't his first time, but here's what made me finally decide to act. Sandra called me on a Monday morning. James, she said, her voice careful. I did some more digging on Novak. I found something you need to know. He's done this before. Not twice. Not 3 times. 7 times that we can confirm across 5 states. And one of the women, a 61-year-old retired nurse in Ohio, she lost everything. Her house, her retirement, her savings. She's living in her daughter's basement now. When she confronted him, he vanished. Moved states, changed the business name, started over. But here's the thing. The FBI has an open investigation. They just don't have enough to bring charges yet. They need a cooperating witness, someone who can document the scheme in real time, someone with, say, 40 years of forensic accounting experience. I understood immediately what she was suggesting. You want me to help build the federal case. I'm saying the option is there. If you're willing, I'll do it. But on one condition. I handle my personal situation my way first. Sandra agreed. For the next 2 weeks, I wore a wire. Not literally. I used the recording equipment Sandra provided, all legally authorized under a federal warrant, to document my wife's phone calls with Victor. I recorded her discussing the pension scheme, the forged documents, the plan to sell our house and split the proceeds. Every conversation was another nail in the coffin. Then came the dinner. Diane suggested it herself. She wanted a family meal, she said. Andrew and Claire were both home for a long weekend. She'd made her famous pot roast. We sat around our dining table, The same table where we'd celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone for 3 decades. Our old Labrador, Duke, was sleeping under the table the way he always did. Diane cleared her throat. So, I've been thinking. About our future. About retirement. She looked nervous. I've been talking to a financial advisor. He thinks we should diversify our investments. Maybe look at some alternative assets. Art. Real estate. She glanced at me, testing the waters. There's this opportunity I've been exploring. I let her talk. I let her lay out the pitch, the same pitch Victor had clearly rehearsed with her. The Art Investment Fund. The guaranteed 15% returns. The exclusive opportunity for accredited investors. When she finished, I set down my fork. Sounds interesting. Would this advisor happen to be Victor Ashford? Of Ashford Creative Ventures. Registered in Illinois. Formerly registered in Wisconsin and Minnesota under different names. The color left her face so fast I thought she might pass out. Or should I call him by his real name? Victor Novak? The man you've been sleeping with at the Gold Coast Marriott every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 8 months? Robert. She began. My name is James. Robert was the name of his last victim's husband. In Ohio. You're not even the only script he's running. She stared at me. Then at Andrew. Then at Claire. Our son's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Our daughter had her hands folded on the table, her prosecutor's composure fully in place. I reached under my chair and pulled out the folder. 3 inches thick. Every bank statement, every forged document, every photograph, every transcript of every recorded conversation. This is everything, I said, placing it on the table. 8 months of transfers totaling $275,000 from our savings. A forged line of credit against our house for another $150,000. Recordings of you planning to fraudulently access my pension using a fake power of attorney. And emails between you and Victor discussing how to liquidate our remaining assets before serving me with divorce papers. Diane was trembling. You recorded me? You forged my signature on a $150,000 loan, I said. You stole from our joint accounts. You were planning to commit fraud against a federal pension. Privacy isn't really the hill you want to die on here, Diane. Mom, Claire said quietly, do you understand what you've done? The forgery alone carries up to 5 years in Illinois. The structured withdrawals are federal. The pension scheme is conspiracy to defraud the United States government. That's up to 10 years. Diane turned to our daughter with wild eyes. You're my child. You're supposed to be on my side. I'm on the side of the law, Mom. And right now, the law is very much not on yours. Andrew spoke for the first time. Mom, did he promise you he loved you? Did he tell you you'd start a new life together? Diane said nothing. Andrew shook his head. Dad showed us his record. 7 women, Mom. 7. You weren't special to him. You were a target. That's not true, Diane whispered. Victor loves me. He's going to leave his other obligations and we're going to start fresh. I pulled out one more document. This is a federal warrant, I said. Not for you. For Victor Novak. The FBI has been building a case against him for 18 months. My recordings, your transactions, your communications, they're all part of that case now. Victor Novak is going to prison. Diane, the question is whether you're going with him, she broke. Not slowly, not with dignity. She collapsed into herself, sobbing so hard, Duke woke up and whimpered. Everything came pouring out. How lonely she'd been since I retired. How she felt invisible. How Victor had made her feel beautiful and important and alive again. How he'd told her I was controlling, that I didn't appreciate her, that she deserved more. The same playbook he'd used on 7 other women. Part of me felt sorry for her. A small part. Then I remembered the recording where she discussed forging a death certificate to access my pension, and that small part evaporated. The next morning, I drove 200 miles north to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where Victor Novak was renting a lakefront house with money stolen from my family. This was the moment I'd mentioned at the beginning, the moment I'd been building toward. I knocked on the door at 9 in the morning. He answered in a bathrobe, coffee in hand. When he saw me, he didn't panic. He smiled. The kind of smile I'd seen on con men my entire career. The smile that says, "I'm smarter than you, and we both know it." "You must be James," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Diane told me about you. Listen, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your wife came to me looking for investment opportunities. I provided a legitimate service. Whatever she told you about our relationship, I think she may have exaggerated things. You know how women get emotional." He was smooth. I'll give him that. Decades of practice. I smiled back. "Victor," I said, "I spent 38 years as a forensic accountant for the FBI. I've taken down men who were 10 times smarter than you. Men who laundered hundreds of millions through shell companies in 12 countries. Men who had armies of lawyers and offshore accounts and encrypted communications. And I found them all. You? You used a Gmail account. You kept your victims' files in a Dropbox folder labeled Projects. You deposited stolen funds into a Chase checking account under your real Social Security number. You're not a mastermind. You're a small-time grifter who preys on lonely women because you're too lazy to earn an honest living." His smile faltered. "But here's the part you should really pay attention to," I continued. "The FBI has a warrant for your arrest. It was signed this morning by a federal judge in Chicago. Right now, there are agents from the Milwaukee field office about 15 minutes away. I know because I'm the cooperating witness who helped build the case. 7 victims across 5 states. Wire fraud, securities fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. The federal sentencing guidelines for your charges put you at 12 to 15 years. No parole in the federal system, Victor. You'll serve every day." He straightened up. His face changed. The charm evaporated. "You're bluffing," he said. But his voice had lost its confidence. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of the warrant. "I'm a forensic accountant, Victor. I don't bluff. I calculate." He tried to close the door. I didn't stop him. I didn't need to. 12 minutes later, 2 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. 4 FBI agents, including Sandra Reeves, walked up to the door. Victor Novak was arrested in his bathrobe. They found 3 phones, 2 laptops, and a safe containing $87,000 in cash in his bedroom. They also found files on 4 women he was currently targeting in addition to Diane. I watched them put him in the back of the SUV. He looked at me through the window, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The kind you see when someone realizes the game is over and there's no exit. I drove home, 200 miles of highway, and I didn't turn on the radio once. I just drove in silence, thinking about 33 years of marriage, thinking about the woman I'd loved since I was 28 years old, thinking about how you can share a bed with someone for 3 decades and never really know what's going on inside their head. The divorce was swift. Claire recommended a colleague of hers, a family law attorney in Chicago named Patricia Holbrook, who specialized in cases involving financial fraud. With the evidence I'd compiled, it wasn't even close. The judge reviewed the forged documents, the structured withdrawals, the recordings, and ruled decisively. I kept the house. I kept my pension. The remaining savings were mine. Diane was ordered to repay the stolen funds, though realistically, the money Victor had taken was gone. His assets were frozen as part of the federal case, and whatever was recovered would be split among all 7 victims. Diane moved into a studio apartment in Cicero. She went back to substitute teaching. The woman who'd been planning to live in a lakefront house in Florida was now grading 9th-grade essays for $14 an hour. Our friends chose sides. Most chose mine. Once they learned the truth, the handful who felt sympathetic toward Diane changed their minds when they heard the recording about the death certificate and the pension scheme. Andrew and Claire were hurt in ways I know they'll carry for years. Andrew flew home 3 times in 2 months. Each time, he'd sit with me on the back porch, Duke at our feet, and we'd talk about everything except what had happened. Sometimes that's enough. Claire threw herself into work, the way she always does when she's processing something painful. But she called me every night, every single night for 4 months. "Hi, Dad. How are you doing?" "I'm okay, sweetheart." "You sure?" "Getting there." 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Diane called me. She was crying. "James, I'm so sorry. I was manipulated. He took advantage of me. Can we talk?" I thought about it, carefully. The way I think about everything. "No," I said. "Not because I'm angry, Diane. I've processed the anger. But what you did wasn't just about Victor. The affair. Sure, maybe he manipulated you into that. Maybe. But the forgery, the structured withdrawals designed to avoid detection, the plan to seize my pension using fraudulent documents, those were calculated decisions. You used skills you learned from living with me to steal from me. That wasn't manipulation. That was choice. And I can't build a life with someone who made those choices." She cried harder. "I lost everything, James. My family, my home, my reputation. I have nothing." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry it came to this. But you need to understand something. You didn't lose these things. You traded them. You traded them for a con man's promises, and you got exactly what con men deliver, nothing." I hung up. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Victor Novak's federal trial began 4 months later. I testified for 2 days, laid out the financial evidence, the pattern across 7 victims, the deliberate targeting of vulnerable women. Claire sat in the gallery. She told me afterward that several jurors were visibly emotional during my testimony. The jury convicted on all 14 counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The judge sentenced him to 14 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. At sentencing, 3 of his other victims gave impact statements. One of them, a 61-year-old retired nurse named Barbara from Columbus, broke down describing how she'd lost her house, her retirement, everything her late husband had left her. When she finished, she looked at me across the courtroom and mouthed 2 words: "Thank you." That moment made everything worth it. Every sleepless night, every recording I forced myself to listen to, every document I cataloged while my heart was breaking, because it wasn't just about me. It was about all of them, every woman this predator had destroyed. That was 7 months ago. I'm still in the house. Duke and I have our routines. Morning walk at 6:30, coffee on the porch at 7, crossword puzzle by 8. Andrew sends me photos from Seattle, hikes, his girlfriend's cooking, a new craft beer he wants me to try. Claire calls every night. Every single night. She hasn't missed once. Last month, I was at the farmer's market on Lincoln Avenue. I go every Saturday. Duke loves the attention, and I've developed a particular fondness for a vendor who makes incredible smoked Gouda. I was standing there, trying to decide between the Gouda and a sharp cheddar, when a woman next to me said, "Get both. Life's too short for compromise on cheese." I looked at her. She was about my age, silver hair, laugh lines, wearing a University of Chicago sweatshirt and sneakers. She had a small dog, some kind of terrier, who was enthusiastically sniffing Duke. I laughed. First real laugh in months. She was right, of course. I bought both. Her name is Ruth. She's a retired librarian, widowed 4 years ago. We stood there talking for 45 minutes while our dogs tangled their leashes around a lamppost. She told me about her book club, a real one, and I told her I'd just reread The Count of Monte Cristo. She said that was the perfect book for a man starting over. I asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime. She said she'd rather get lunch. "Coffee is what you do when you're not sure," she said. "Lunch means you're interested." We had lunch the next day, and the day after that. We've had lunch 9 times now. I haven't told her about Diane yet. Not the details. She knows I'm divorced, knows it was difficult. She hasn't pushed. Ruth is the kind of person who understands that some stories need to be told at the right time. I took down the family photos in the hallway last week. Not all of them. I kept the ones of the kids, but the ones of Diane and me, the wedding photo, the anniversary portraits, the vacation snapshots, I put them in a box and stored them in the attic. Andrew was home when I did it, and he helped without saying a word. When we finished, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, You deserve to be happy, Dad. People ask me sometimes if I'd do anything differently. If I wish I'd confronted Diane that first day when I saw the email, before the damage got worse. Here's what I tell them. In my career, I learned that the difference between a case that sticks and a case that falls apart is patience. If I'd confronted Diane in April, she'd have deleted the evidence, warned Victor, and I would have been left with accusations and no proof. Victor would have moved to another state, found another woman, stolen another life's savings. Instead, because I waited, because I built the case properly, he's sitting in a federal prison cell for the next 14 years. 7 women got justice. My children got the truth, and I got to keep everything I'd worked 40 years to build. Patience isn't passive. It's the hardest kind of strength there is. Some nights I sit on the back porch with Duke, watching the lights of Chicago flicker against the lake. I think about Diane sometimes. Not with anger anymore. More like studying an old case file. Trying to understand the motive, the turning point, the moment someone decides that what they have isn't enough and burns it all down for a fantasy. I don't think I'll ever fully understand it, and I've made peace with that. What I do understand is this. You can spend 33 years sleeping next to someone and never see who they really are. You can trust someone with your finances, your future, your heart, and they can betray every single one. But here's the thing they don't put in the brochure. You can also survive it. You can take everything you've learned in a lifetime and use it to protect yourself. You can stand in a courtroom and make sure the person who preyed on your family never does it to anyone else. You can watch your children grow into people who choose integrity over convenience, truth over comfort. And you can meet someone at a farmer's market who makes you laugh over cheese and reminds you that the world still has good people in it. Victor Novak thought he was the smartest person in every room he walked into. He thought he could outsmart an FBI forensic accountant the same way he outsmarted lonely women. He was wrong. Diane thought I was too absorbed in my numbers, too rigid, too predictable to ever notice what she was doing. She was wrong too. Numbers don't lie. People do. And when you spend your whole life following the numbers, eventually they lead you to the truth. Even when the truth is something you never wanted to find. I made mine clear. I followed the money. And in the end, the money told me everything I needed to know.